stream. Welcome to Nicole, who is our tremendous guest. I've just had 15 minutes where I've had lots of time with Nicole, which you will learn about. So Nicole Posner is our guest today, and we're going to be talking about how to manage difficult conversations. And you will learn more about this when I introduce Nicole more formally. So first of all, thank you for joining BIP Chat, which goes out live into LinkedIn, live onto Facebook, and we also put it across 12 podcast channels and onto our YouTube. So you may be walking your dog, you may be in the car and listening back to this, and please stay with us for the next 45 minutes, because the subject that we're covering today is so relevant to every single one of us. It's relevant to our spouses, our children, our business colleagues, everybody, because wouldn't it be better to know how to have more powerful conversations and resolve any conflict that we find ourselves in? And I'm going to be brave enough to share a few of my own experiences of that, and where I wish that I had known Nicole, and I might have saved some relationships in the past. So enjoy that. So let me first of all, top of the show, just explain what BIP Chat is. BIP stands for Business is Personal. Philosophy that Thomas and I have had all our business lives, but it's the juxtaposition of when somebody said to me once, Penny, it's not personal, it's just business. And it was like they took a carving knife to my heart when they said that, because for all of us, business is personal, and it should be allowed to be personal. We cannot expect emotion to come into anything that we do with our clients, our colleagues, where we want to care for people, where we want to have impact, and park emotion at the door when it's expected to be parked. So Business is Personal is a community that we run, BIP 100, and it's for experts. And we chose to create this community because finding great experts in our lives, in all our lives, is the hardest thing to do.
Really hard.
Really hard. We spend a lot of our time looking for clients, but how much of our time do we spend looking for the right expert into our business? And we want BIP 100, where we curate experts in, and we put a lot of effort into this, to be the place that people can come to Thomas and I and say, do you know somebody who does X, Y, Z? And we can say, well, actually, we've already spent a lot of time with this person. We know, we respect them, and we like their values. So let us introduce you to them. And so on that note, let me introduce you to Nicole Posner. I don't think I need to spell Nicole's name to you, but I will. Nicole, you know how to spell that. Posner, Posner. So you can look Nicole up on LinkedIn, either while you're watching, listening to this, perhaps on another device, or later on. So no one relishes the thought of a difficult conversation. No one relishes it. Let's get that out there first. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and thinks, yay, great, let's create some shitty conversations in our lives. But listen, this is a skill that we can acquire, and you can't acquire it necessarily in 45 minutes, but you can certainly get motivated to acquire this skill and create a lot more harmony in your own life and in the lives of those that you love and work with. Nicole is known really traditionally as a workplace mediator, is doing less and less of that because she's being really highly demanded in a consultative role as a coach and as a trainer in this world. Very excited that this year she was voted the Communication and Conflict Consultant of the Year by the Greater London Enterprise Board, and in an award. And she's got the most phenomenal way of getting this information across, and is so heartfelt about the impact she wants to have. This is Nicole's book, which I'm showing here. So as you're walking your dog, you're not going to be able to see it. It's called And Breathe. So look it up on Amazon. Prevent, manage, and master difficult leadership conversations in business and beyond. So welcome to you. I'm not going to say as much now. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what we were talking about today. Welcome to you, Nicole. Do you want to pad out a little bit of what I've talked about, maybe your journey to this point, so that everybody gets to know you a little bit more?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the very warm welcome. So, yes, how did I get here? A long journey. I mean, we've all got a story. I'll try and give you the abridged version. I started life many years ago in PR, working in a very toxic culture. And I think that's just the nature of the industry, really. Anyone that works sort of in media and advertising will understand what I'm talking about. It's a demanding industry. That there's a lot of deadlines and a lot of impatience behind that. And I worked in that for about 5 years, which is where I learned my, I suppose, my communication skills, which is what helps me deal with communication now. Left there after about 5 years and set up my own marketing business, doing communication for businesses, for marketing purposes. And along that journey, I decided to study psychology for my own purposes. Who would do that? I don't know. And learned way too much about myself. It was a study group, and it came to an end. And after about 6 years of doing that, I thought I actually really want to do something with this, because I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated what makes them tick, how they operate. And I decided to do a distant learning counselling course. One module on there was mediation. I thought, I love the fact there's a quick fix to issues, whatever people are dealing with, in a short time frame, unlike other therapies. And the training I did was underpinned with the psychology of conflict, which for me was a perfect marriage of studying psychology. And together with my communication skills that I've carried with me throughout many years, it took me to a career in mediation. But what I learned from there was that so much conflict didn't need to happen, because within certainly business environments, business owners and leaders just didn't know how to address issues. They didn't know how to have those difficult conversations when they needed to, which meant issues just spiraled, escalated, never got dealt with, avoided. And I felt that I could make a greater impact in the world by helping leaders and to sort of deal with those conversations up here, rather than dealing with the messy bit down there.
Yeah.
So that's how I decided I evolved into where I am now, which is more leadership, communication and conflict consultation and coaching and training.
God, amazing. What a beautiful sort of organic journey that you've been through to have the wisdom. I mean, we can all gather up some skills and learn some stuff, but there's so much wisdom in that journey, which is really powerful. Sorry, Thomas, you were about to say something.
Yeah, Nicole. So it's PR, it's communications, it's marketing, it's psychology, it's counselling, it's mediation. How long was that journey of knowledge gathering to write this book?
Well, when I started PR, I was in my early 20s. I mean, I can tell you how old I am now.
5 years ago then.
Exactly, six.
All right then.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey. It is a long journey, and I think throughout our lives and our personal lives as well, we all deal with conflict in all ways. Within business relationships, within personal relationships. So there's always a learning, but it's an awareness of what you take from every situation as well. And I think there are still many situations I look back on in my own life, and I think 10 years ago, I would have dealt with that very differently to how I do now. So.
Yeah. I'm thinking exactly that. So a girlfriend that I had, and we were really close, and something went wrong. And sometimes we just pass each other in Waitrose, and it's really challenging for me. But, at the time, and it was about 10, 12 years ago, I don't know whether it would be maturity, the knowledge that you pass on. I very much wish we'd handled it differently. And so what is it that is so frightening for people then about going into a scenario? Where is that fear coming from? Because I think for me it was fear. I think I want to give a bit of background to that, actually, because I shared with Nicole before we went live that I was brought up in a home that externally everything looked perfect. My parents wanted everything to look perfect, and it was perfect externally. Everything looked wonderful, and some people might relate to that. Inside, we were never allowed to discuss anything that wasn't right, and we weren't even allowed to argue as siblings. you know, we literally, everything got put into boxes, and you know, so
which is so unhealthy, you know, it's so unhealthy. Yeah, of course.
It's so unhealthy. So I wonder how many people listening to me will think, well, actually, I relate to that. So there is a fear built up inside you when you see conflict. And so a lot of is a fear something that people have?
Very much so. Yeah. I think there's a fear of confrontation, there's a fear of pushback, you know, what you're presenting is going to be received. There's a fear of judgment. There's a fear of speaking up. There's a fear of damaging relationships. There's a fear of losing control, a fear of not being able to articulate yourself well, a fear of just trying to think, lost the
well, that is a lot of fears.
You know, there's a lot, you know, there's a fear of people not wanting to like you anymore if you know, you don't say things in the right way, the people pleasers. You know, and a lot of it is about, you know, as you said, what you've been brought up in the environment. If that's your normal, and that's how you've been brought up to deal or not deal with situations, that is going to be your modus operandi. That's how you're gonna, interesting. That's how you
and we're gonna this people pleaser thing, we're going to talk later, so keep listening, because we're going to talk about 3 archetypes around this. So people pleaser is one of them, and we're going to talk about the other 2 later, so keep listening, because it'd be interesting for you as a listener to work out which one you are. So Thomas, again, I saw your mouth open, just I was saying that.
So my question, Nicole, is how do you prepare for a difficult conversation? Because it's not something any of us like. There's the fear of the outcome, or not being able to control the outcome or be involved in the outcome. There's a fear of even engaging in it, almost like that same fear of being bullied. So how do you help people prepare for a difficult conversation that they've got to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think the very first thing is to recognize what they're afraid of, because everyone's fear is going to be different. So if it's a fear of losing control of yourself, for example, so if we rewind a little bit, the fear is always based on something that's happened to us in our past. So, for example, what your story is, Penny, is, you know, you were told you don't deal with anything. That's your story, your narrative about it. So you have to recognize what that fear is. Usually something that's happened in the past before, where, let's say you spoke up in a meeting and you were shut down, and that's your fear, you know. So next time you are in a similar situation, either with a colleague, a business partner, or in a personal relationship, your fear is, I'm going to be shut down again. So you have to recognize that is actually what you're afraid of, as opposed to just avoiding the conversation. And recognizing that, okay, what tools can I use to support me to manage this going forward? So if your fear is, I'm going to be shut down, okay, well, let's prepare. First of all, prepare yourself. I have a little acronym I always use, which is called use a MAP. So manage your mindset, think about the what you want to achieve from the conversation, and plan and prepare for it. But depending on every situation, it is always going to be slightly different. I think your mindset is always the first thing, which is most important. As we all know, our brain, our mind is such a powerful thing, and it can stop us literally from engaging or from doing anything unless we manage it. So recognizing, as I said before, your fear, and there are ways to manage your mindset. You know, if you're feeling afraid, how do I stop myself? If you're feeling fearful, what can I do to change that, to calm myself down first? Because one should never engage in a challenging situation, you know, unless you're in a good frame of mind. We're never going to be in a good frame of mind when we have a difficult conversation, let's be honest. But so there are tools you can use to calm yourself. always focus on what you want to achieve at the end of it and plan for it. Plan what obstacles you might face along the way, you know, pushback, they might say X, Y, or Z. Have a response ready for that. Whatever, there is a million different conversations we can have.
And do you scenario plan that with your clients?
Yes.
Nicole, so that you play the devil's advocate, if you like, of you go through their mindset, what they're trying to achieve, and their plan, but then you play the character of the person they're going into conflict with.
So
that's really terrific.
So you know, there will be a situation where I'm just trying to think of one. You can never think of them when you need one, but a situation, let's say, where a manager has to face a difficult conversation, a bullying conversation with a team member, for example. And again, if we go back to the people pleaser, that's, you know, an extraordinarily difficult situation even more.
Your post this week on LinkedIn about the person who's the highest performer and still a bully.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I like
so. You know, that is a fairly common situation in any business. So
you both have to explain what that scenario was.
Oh, okay. So let's say you're a manager in a business and you have a team member who is, you know, your hot shot and bringing in all the money and most productive and hitting all the targets, but they're also a bully. And they are, you know, their behavior within the department is, you know, they shut people down, they're rude, they're aggressive, they're confrontational. As a manager,
and this is very common, isn't it?
Yes. So as the manager, you know, there's a lot of fear to rock the boat. You know, you don't want to, you know, stop that, get them upset, but you also know you've got to manage. You know, you can't allow that behavior to continue.
That's good.
So I would sit down with, you know, my client and I'd say, right, what are you afraid of here? And, you know, that, well, you know, if I don't say it right, they're going to, you know, throw it back in my face and they'll raise a grievance about me and whatever. So we'll go through each potential obstacle in the conversation and I'll give them variations of things that they could say in response to that answer or that answer. And that gives them confidence, because of, you know, that is the one thing, anxiety, when people feel anxious about a conversation, they're never going to show up confident in it. So it brings them the confidence, and we'll practice it, which also brings more confidence. And also, most important, you know, you're not always going to get what you want from the conversation. You're not always going to get the outcome you want. So, you know, don't go into a spiral about it afterwards, except, you know, if this bully, for example, doesn't acknowledge what you're saying in the conversation, you have to be focused on the fact that you can't allow the bullying behavior to continue. And it might mean, you know, if a grievance hasn't been raised, a grievance might be raised about them, and which will have to be investigated. But the point is, you've got to be clear about your focus. The focus is the bullying behavior has to stop. So don't be derailed by them coming back at you with a load of other rubbish.
And in a scenario like that, Nicole, would you ever act on behalf of the client who's asking you to guide them on their conversation? Would you actually ever go and talk to the bully, the character, yourself, to pre-prep them for this difficult conversation with your colleague or client?
If they ask, I mean, and so that's an interesting point, to kind of like prep for what's coming. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sort of acting as the mediator to sort of, I don't know what diffuse, reduce the sting or the bite.
I mean, I've done that in the context of a mediation, because I don't know if you're familiar with the mediation process, or within business, within workplace anyway. You would always have a conversation with with both parties first individually.
Okay.
Where there is a conversation around awareness of one's own behavior, and you know, generally people who end up in mediation knows that there's a problem, and that they might be the cause of it, but it's about helping them to perspective, I guess. Some get it, some don't, but yeah. So in that,
so what I'm really curious about, just moving on from that, is got this concept called quiet quitters at the moment in businesses. When I look back to scenarios where I've just chosen to step away because I just can't be bothered, I've just not been motivated to heal something. I've just thought, you don't mean that enough to me to go into conflict. You've just shown me. So I'm interested in, I wonder how, you know, with this challenge that companies are having now, whether if you had the wrong leader in place, or the leader wasn't skilled in the way that you would help them to be skilled, they could have all sorts of quiet quitters who just sort of think, I can't be bothered. I'm not even going to share. So how do you create a culture within an organization for people to know that the organization wants people to speak up and talk about challenges?
Well, I think that always has to be mirrored from the top down. And I think, you know, you have to create a sense of psychological safety, that it's okay to speak up. And that concept of giving up on people, you know, I a little bit narked by this quiet quitting thing, because I think it's about the leaders who are at fault. If you can't, as a leader, you're there to engage, inspire, motivate, nurture, you know, people who work in your team. If you give up on them, should you be in a leadership role? You know,
yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts. You know, I think it's very easy to blame people who aren't motivated. Okay, everyone has a different reason for turning up to work. Some people just do it for a paycheck, and nothing will motivate them except that paycheck, and they will be termed as a quiet quitter because they come in, they do their job, they leave. And in many industries that is fine, you know, they're not expected to do much more. But when you want to encourage loyalty and support and, you know, contribution to in a business, you have to be there helping them and showing them the way. And
yeah, absolutely. So there's two types of, I'm being very generalistic here, so I'd like you to fill in the gaps, but I'm classically quite a non-assertive person. And then you've got people who are assertive with their opinions and their thoughts. And I got to a point where, as a non-assertive person, when I started to get very exhausted in life, and I started to interpret that anybody that was assertive was being a bully, but they weren't really. I had just gone into the way down into passiveness, and I was seeing them as becoming a bully. And is that a scenario that can often happen when you've got two personality types in an organization?
Yeah, I think that is quite a general opinion. I know that's your personal narrative about it. Anyone who is passive and who chooses not to engage in confrontation, or who runs away from it, is always generally going to find anyone who is quite overwhelming to be bullying.
That's interesting.
But assertiveness is not the same as bullying.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's trying to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Because the passive person is just as annoying. Ask my sister. She's very assertive, and she finds me terribly annoying.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I think
it's frustration. I mean, I think for the assertive person, somebody that doesn't speak up is frustrating. But I always say every behavior is a window into somebody's world. So
that's
how we how we show up there's a reason behind it. And I always invite people to knock on the window and look through. because what you see at surface level is we don't all, if life's great, we all show up in a certain way in our life. We don't need to be overly assertive. There's a reason why we feel we have to be overly assertive. If we are very passive, there's usually a reason why we choose to be, or we are quieter than our colleagues or whatever. So I always say, don't take whatever you see as on the surface as face value. And like when we show up, in we're confrontational. If we're happy, there's no need for us to show up in a confrontational way. There's always something that's driving behind that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
And Nicole, you talk about these 3 different profiles, these 3 different archetypes. Can you take us through those 3 different behaviors that people have, or profiles?
Yeah, so just to give a bit of a background here, this is something I wrote about in my book. So there's the people pleasers, the freshers, and the warriors.
People pleasers, freshers, and warriors.
Yeah. Now, I'm not one for labeling people. I don't believe in labels, but what I say is that there's elements in each of these archetypes that if we bring to our relationships or conversations or communication, they can have an impact, a negative impact, if we're not aware of it. That's not to say they're not good, or that they're not good traits, because people pleasers have some lovely traits. I know, I'm a people pleaser. So, but a people pleaser, for example, can have difficulty setting boundaries. They can have difficulty saying no. They can sit on the fence and, say yes to everybody, and then cause disruption, because those 2 people might then realize that actually what they said wasn't true about them, or what they said wasn't true about them. Then you have people who just always agree. And so if you're, say, a manager and you just always agree with your boss, you're never going to show your true colors. You're never going to be able to climb up a ladder within your business, the corporate ladder, if you're just saying yes. And then if, again, something I've seen endless times, if you're a manager and you are scared of confrontation, you're never going to manage bullying behavior or team conflict very well. Saying no to people, and then suddenly having to say yes, and suddenly your colleague or your team member is shocked and disbelief. How could you say no to me? You never said no to me before.
And can you tell when you're talking to Penny and I, or being interviewed by Penny and I, can you tell whether we're a people pleaser, a fresher, or a warrior?
Or my instinct, although you did put up your hands before, is that you're probably a bit of a warrior, Thomas.
I'm the warrior.
So we need to come to that then.
Yeah. Only because, and perhaps is a good time to go on to this characteristic now, is you're quite a direct person. You say things quite directly, and which is great. Everyone knows where they stand, and there's no grey areas. But in certain situations that can present, difficulties. It could be if you're too direct, you offend people.
I do that a lot.
It could be an impatience you bring with you. If you expect people to always match, where you're at in a conversation, and they're not there with you. It could be that you don't pick up on people problems because you're business focused, not so much people focused. So if there's a problem brewing, you might not spot it early enough.
You got me. You got me.
Have I
all of the above? 100%.
Thing is, poor Thomas ended up having a 3-hour talk with me, with us both sitting on the floor on Saturday night about a few things. We went into a really big conversation about a few things.
And it was
So,
a difficult conversation.
And it was a difficult conversation we had to
And
have.
how did it pan out?
Oh,
in
it's
the end?
brilliant.
I'm sure. Oh, good.
Brilliant, absolutely.
Well,
brilliant.
I realised over the 3 hours, I realised that everything Penny said was she was right.
There you go. Perfect.
What's the you've talked about the people pleaser, you talked about me as a warrior. What's the fresher profile, Nicole?
Okay, so the fresher are your newly promoted, inexperienced managers or business, and it could be a business owner as well. So it might be a business owner who
fresh as in young to the role.
Yes, fresh, inexperienced.
Okay.
So a new manager who's been newly promoted into post, let's say, so let's take an industry like engineering, a brilliant engineer, and they're in line for a promotion because they're doing really well, but they're put into a people management role. But they're not really interested or have the experience to manage people. They're an engineer by trade. So there's a lot of, thrown into the lion's den. And, why should you be expected to know how to manage people when that's not what you're trained to do, or not where your background or experience is? People management is a different job completely. And there's also an expectation by many business owners that people want to do that job. And I was listening to a great interview with Steve Bartlett and, oh God, it'll come back to me in a sec. What is her name? Nicola Mendelsohn from Facebook.
Oh yeah, Nicola from Facebook. Yeah.
And she was talking about exactly this point, that if people are looking for a promotion or to be recognized, they don't necessarily put them into a people management role if that's not what they want to do.
That's clever.
Yeah, they've got a new name for it. I can't actually remember what it was. It's a different category, if you like. So it's
an important title.
Yeah, you're not promoted into management if you don't want to be, but you're still recognized as being, worthy of something else. And I think that was fantastic, because this is where so many managers come a cropper, this expectation. So they're promoted into this new role and they don't have to Scooby-Doo what they're doing. And the company or the business don't recognize that either. And equally, if you're a small business and you're starting to expand, Penny, we talked before about possibly expanding, your team. If you're not a people-focused person, and you don't know how to manage people, that's also really, you're also a fresher as well, because you've never managed a team of people before. And that brings, a lot of problems with, recruitment, onboarding. You don't do it right, you don't have the experience to do it right, you can hire the wrong people, you can not do the onboarding process well enough because you just don't know how. And that can create problems, expectations that people know how to use your systems and processes, and they may well have done it well in another job, but there's an expectation from you that they should as well. So there's each trait brings something else.
So it's possible to have all three of these profiles at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're not, that's why I preempted this before with, you're not necessarily labeled as the person, but they're characteristics from each archetype that if we recognize in ourselves, that we can hopefully be more aware of and manage those situations differently or better.
Yeah, very, very powerful, because there were definitely things there when you talk about the warrior with you, Thomas, that you are very, very tuned in people's emotions and their problems and their needs. You do notice those. So yeah, I like the fact that you can see different parts of you in those.
Pick and choose.
That's really good. So it's incredible how fast we've got about 10 minutes left. Now, the way that you've designed the book, I really like, because you've got prevent and then cure. And so this is where I imagine people come to you in crisis because they've done no prevention work. They've not built these skills into their company. And then it's like taking them to the emergency room.
Emergency room,
yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit about prevention. How do people achieve prevention? What sort of work do you do in that?
I do a lot of training. I go into organisations and do training there. And as you said, it's about awareness. So what factors contribute to conflict, which might be our own behaviours, our communication style, things we do that, I talk in the book about communication baggage, what we bring with us from other meetings into a meeting with our teams or whatever. Factors within the organisation that can create conflict that we might not be aware of. Change in management, cross-reporting, amongst other managers or directors. So the part one is focused on things that we might not have tapped into that are creating conflict within businesses.
So it's like a bit of an audit on the existing situation.
Exactly. Things you might think, oh yeah, I never thought of that, or I didn't think, or
something that might be unfair and you didn't realize it was.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So you actually ask people when you're training them what causes conflict inside the organization so that you can deal with those issues one by one, do you?
Yeah, so before I would do a training, I'd always have a chat with either the HR or whoever's brought me in to do it, and just say, what are you experiencing here? And, where do you see the gaps? I did a training recently. We were talking about, it was sort of fairly senior leadership. And there was one lady who was ironically the communications director. But, she said, look, I've just got this particular issue. And it wasn't the fact that she was a communications director really had nothing to do with it. It was just a human conversation, not knowing how to deal with certain pushback from, a new team member who'd come on board. That was specific to them. So what I always try and do is make my training as bespoke as possible to what's going on in that company for them at the time. I'd offer something else as well, which I'm working on, which is separate to that, which is more of an audit where I will go in and look myself in what I see rather what then the information they're giving back. So that's what I would do. So that's about conflict prevention. And then the first part of the book is focused on that. Part two is, here are the fixes. This is what you need to do. Now that you know what the problem is, how do you deal with that? Or how do you manage it yourself, or being aware of your own issues or behaviours that you bring to the table?
And where is the demand, Nicole? Is the demand on the cure side, or is demand on the prevention side?
I think there's more awareness of the fact that people, I'm happy to say that companies are aware that they need to prevent, for a healthier business. Healthier as in, if the well-being of your employees or your company are, if they're, well, I can't say, start again. If your the well-being of your employees is good, their emotional well-being is good, that's going to impact how they show up, how they perform, the productivity. So ultimately the health of your business too. So I think there's much more awareness of that now, that there's a need.
And how do you deal with the fact you've got all these different personality profiles where some people are open and some people are closed, some people are assertive, some people are non-assertive? And their actual behavior style, their communication style, the way they work, the way they type, the way they send a message, all of that can create conflict and therefore put you off engaging with that person completely. Is that
absolutely? Yeah.
presumably every organization is suffering from behavior style conflict of this is the way we should do it, that's the way I don't do it that way, I do it this way.
Well, I think first of all there's an assumption there that everyone should do it in a certain way, but I think what you need to do is have the business needs to have an awareness that everybody communicates in different ways, and the impact of those communications. So some people, for example, sending an email will send, a very short, blunt email to someone, which will be received as very rude. Whereas,
yeah, that's me. I send those emails.
I'm giggling away. Yeah.
Now, if as a colleague, that that's just your style, then you'll say, oh, that's just Thomas. But if you're communicating with someone new, their first, interaction with you will be, oh, that's a bit short or a bit blunt. So it's knowing, and I think that brings me to a really important point, the value of relationships, knowing the person you're communicating with, if at all possible. And recognizing that some people, like my husband, for example, if you sent him, an email with more than 10 lines, he wouldn't read it. So, and I'm the opposite. I need to explain everything in great detail, and he either doesn't read it or he, he brushes through it, and that can create conflict as well. So when I email him, I try and make it as succinct as possible. So it's knowing.
I saw a lot of myself in your husband last week, Nicole.
Impatient.
Thomas he says, no, don't give me loads of instructions, just one at a time. When I've done that, give me the next one.
That. Yeah.
And we're coming to close now, but I'm really interested in this in your book when you talk about be curious. This is in the cure bit.
Yeah.
And this option 1, the ideal response in thing, where somebody would say, oh, I had no idea, I'm concerned to hear that. Could you possibly give me some examples? So that person's a hero. And then the different person was, I'd like to know who exactly made these allegations against me.
The witch hunt.
That's me.
Yeah.
Can you actually help someone not to be option 2?
Yes.
Nothing personal in this question, because that's quite a interesting insight into the 2 ways that people will
respond.
Did you know you were doing real-time coaching of Penny?
Cool. Marriage counselling.
Cool.
Yeah.
Live to thousands.
Live.
You can, of course you can, and that goes back to what I said before, which is every behavior is a window into someone's world. So, if you respond like that, your defenses are up for a reason. You feel criticized, you feel judged, and it's how you position it. It's understanding, how that other person is feeling in that moment and why. And there is a way to approach a conversation like that. And a response needs to be managed in a different way, in an empathetic way. So
it's quite funny. I'll give everybody the example. Somebody sent me a message saying, I think you should tell Thomas to tidy up his bookcase. They sent me a message like that on LinkedIn. I thought it was quite funny. Thomas went on an absolute witch hunt. I had to go back through so many LinkedIn messages to find out who it was. And he straight away went block for life.
Yeah, I don't want that person in my life.
Okay, I get that. I can help you with this, Thomas. Let's have a chat.
Well, you come round and tidy it up. I love it.
Yeah. No, I think your bookcase is fabulous. I love your bookcase, Thomas. It's fabulous.
Yeah, we love it.
Because it's you.
I tidied up a little bit, actually. That's what started the conversation. Why have you been in my office tidying up? Anyway, on that note, business is personal. So you get it all with Thomas and I. You get it all. And Nicole, that was a fantastic conversation with you. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. If you've given us your full attention, we're really grateful in a busy life. And I hope that you really got a lot from this. I'm sure you will have done. If nothing else, you'll have known the issues that we have in our marriage. And And
Nothing like airing your dirty laundry in public.
exactly.
Yeah.
As Thomas just showed, yeah, and Breathe on Amazon. It's a brilliant book. It's a
It
really,
really is a great book, Nicole. I love
and
it.
it's a pick
Thank
up
you
and
very
put
much.
down and pick up and put down. You don't have to read it all in the order that it's written. It's brilliant, very distinctive chapters and really powerful. So thank you, Nicole, for this amazing conversation.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.